Hello, welcome back to the Carry Handle Minute. Nope, that's not what this is. This is a new thing. This is a different thing. This is a YouTube video or a long format video. Hello, I'm Bryce with the Carry Handle Podcast. I'm one of the hosts. If you're not familiar with my content and you're just stumbling upon me, welcome. Hello. I'm not an expert. I work with AR-15s professionally, but I am not a shooter, or I'm not a professional shooter. I just tinker with guns for a living, and I, in my free time, also tinker with guns. So this is me venturing out of my comfort zone, and that is what I like to say, shooting past bad breath, or bad breath distances, or red dot distances. So this is me getting into what I would consider further than normal shooting for me. So I needed something that was magnified on a rifle that I'm relatively familiar with, that I can expect some level of accuracy from. And I think I've succeeded somewhat in at least getting on the range. And that, if you know, or if you're familiar with me in any facet, whether it be online or in person, typically I like to do things cry once kind of thing, but that isn't always feasible. So in my world, I'm kind of understanding and accepting sometimes I need to just get on the range and do the thing I need to get on the range. So in that vein of almost 2 minutes of rambling, hello, this is an intro to Bryce shooting long range-ish, and this is just kind of the overview of what I've learned just dipping my toe in. This is after getting, some very preliminary load, if you could even call that load data, on this rifle. This is a 5.56 gun. This is nothing crazy. This is not a fun caliber. This isn't even like a 6 arc. It's not 300. It's nothing. So this is just a 5.56 gun for me to press triggers with. I wanted something more budget minded in terms of every time I press the trigger, I'm not throwing $1 down range. Realistically, that's a fact of life when you start getting into different calibers, but that's not what I wanted out of this. I wanted to have some level of magnification, to get my feet wet, to understand what I don't know and what I want to know, and learn as much as I can. So, and the best thing for me to do is to get on the range. And for me to do that, I built this. This is, like I said, a 5.56 gun. This is effectively a parts gun. It's not, I didn't go out with a list of parts and then came up with this, or I didn't see somebody else's gun and build somebody else's gun. I just kind of had some parts laying around and I put them together to fulfill a task that I needed. That I don't necessarily have what I think I want, but that's the key here, is I don't know what I need. So what I want and what I need are very different things, especially when I'm just getting into this. Now, when I say I'm just getting into this, I'm a firearms enthusiast. I do this for fun. This is, and professionally as well, in a different capacity. But this is what I really like doing, and while this is still shooting, it's a new discipline, or a different discipline. I am not a traditional rifle. I haven't been trained as a traditional rifleman, just occasionally on a farm or a ranch with a rifle and a four-wheeler. So that's where I learned. I'm a civilian by every measure of the word. So I kind of cobbled this together based on what I've seen, based on videos. So I've kind of alluded to it. But like I said, 5.56 gun, 223 5.56. This is actually a barrel out of an MP Sport that I had from about 10 years ago or so. So it's an older barrel. I shot a fair bit on. It's a 5R rifling, 1 1/8 twist, mid-length, pinned, front sight, post gun. Mid-length gas guns weren't as prevalent as they used to be, so I used to chop front sights off to get rails to fit on. So that's what this barrel was. I chopped the front sight off and dremeled it down so it could fit a handguard over it. So I had this barrel laying around. I knew it was relatively accurate for the most part. And when I say accurate for me, because I'm obviously human, I'm an imperfect base of which to test a mechanical device. So when I say accuracy, or this has an inherent I'm able to get a level of accuracy out of this rifle. a decent level of accuracy out of this barrel. I don't have pictures of it because I didn't think to do this. This was just kind of an off-the-cuff video because I figured I'd like to talk about this, so I'm going to. But this did print about a minute and a half, just with 55 grain at 100 yards on not a great day. I mean, it wasn't, I mean, I live in Central Florida, so I mean, relative to whatever barometric pressure, whatever, if you care about any of that. I live in Central Florida. I was shooting 55 grain GG&G. That's what this gun is zeroed for. That's what it likes, or 55 grain, but specifically it really printed well. The minute and a half and under, I would say it was under a minute and a half just based on the grid on the target, but you know, I feel like everybody says their gun's a minute because they shot it, like the one group, but this was a 10-round group. I do 10-round groups or 9-round groups just because I don't know. I had always heard that 9-round groups were just 3-round groups, which is basic math, but just when you break it down like that, I like that. More data is better. And I'm not really trying to get a barrel to print a certain way. I need the barrel to print a certain way for me. So I need as much data as possible. So if I print as many rounds as possible, I get as much data, right? So 10 rounds, and that's after shooting a fair bit. I wasn't getting a lot of heat. There wasn't any kind of mirage. I wasn't cooking the gun, right? But I was still, you know, it was a relatively decent cadence. So, I mean, for what this gun does and what it's for, and I'm excited for what it is and what I've gotten from it so far. Changes I've made since building it and zeroing it and playing with it and using it since the first outings. I have an ARCA section right here. I've also updated the ball. I have a ball head on here now instead of the traditional BOG Death Grip saddle. I didn't like that very much. It was very clunky. It had 3 different axes you had to mess with, or different axis you could adjust, which is cool until you really need to use the rifle. It's neat for multiple rifles if you're just, I guess if it's a convenience thing, but if you're really trying to shoot off of a tripod, to me it seems like, from what I understand, a very preliminary understanding of this craft, of this discipline, is that ARCA is kind of the way. So I grabbed an ARCA Swiss BOG M-LOK section. The first one I got, I think, was a Sunway photo, but it was entirely too long. So this rifle isn't just to be shot off of a tripod. I just wanted to learn how to shoot off of a tripod because it seems like that's something that could be advantageous moving down the line if I were to take this predator hunting or varmint hunting like coyotes or anything like that. So this seems like it's, especially in PRS, if I do any DMR matches or PRS matches or anything like that, there's stages around shooting with the tripod as your barricade or as your you use it in, or from what I've seen, to shoot. So again, this is all a very basic understanding of a sport I'm trying to get into. And I figured I'd open the kimono, and as it were, and be vulnerable and show you what I'm learning so far. So just regular carbine. I realize I'm doing a bunch of squirrely shit here, but like I said, I got the barrel that I wanted, and the accuracy is what I wanted, and the changes, like I said, that I were making was this. And then when actually we talk about the changes on the rifle, I added a muzzle brake, which kind of breaks a cardinal. It's kind of a cardinal rule for me. I'm not really a big muzzle brake guy. They're very obnoxious, and I don't really like shooting around them. Shooting them is probably okay, but shooting them around other people isn't great. But in this particular instance, something I was noticing, obviously, it's 5.56, it's not going to do that much moving, but it did more moving than I wanted it to, and it was moving and taking my attention away from things that I would rather focus on. So it is laziness. I could apply better fundamentals, and I understand that. So the muzzle brake is to help me, or in my mind, is to help me focus somewhere else, focus my efforts somewhere else. I understand the concept and the basic principles about shooting prone or shooting off a bench or shooting in this somewhat different stances and stuff like that, but this is me trying to put as much effort somewhere else. So it's a lazy man's solution. So that's my first solution. This is just the Midwest Industries. It's just timed. It uses a crush washer. It doesn't use washers or spacers or anything like that. So I don't have a suppressor or anything I plan on mounting on this. So all it needed to do is shoot some gas this way and keep the muzzle sort of like this. So that's all I needed this to do. Moving further back, obviously I have a bipod. This is not an actual Atlas bipod. I cannot spend 200 some odd dollars right now on a bipod. So I have this crappy like airsoft $30 copy, or 30 whatever, maybe $30 at the time of this copy of an Atlas. It locks, it does the Atlas-y things, and it has kind of a chintzy arm style bipod Harris mount. So if I wanted to, I could change the mount out, but for $30, it's better than one of the kind of lower end Cadwell like Harris clones. And I think I get a little bit more versatility. I mean, it comes with the different feet. So if I want spike feet, it has spike feet. That's kind of cool. It has that adjustment, you know. It comes with not a great bipod, not a great disconnect. You kind of have to play with it a lot to keep it locked, which isn't super fun, especially when I was shooting. I have one on my on my LMT, or my MWS, not this one, but it rattled loose, and so I picked the rifle up to unload it, and the bipod fell off of it. But for $30, I mean, it does everything I need it to. I'm not getting dropped anywhere and doing anything fun with a bipod like this. This is just to make it easier for me not to spend a few $100s yet, because eventually I'll invest in one. But right now, this is what I got. Moving back, it does have a light. It's an Arisaka 600 with a extreme throw head. It's a two cell 600 series, so not rechargeable, CR123 dual cell, with just their momentary cap. I'm not big on wires, and I'm not, I don't know, super exciting. So it's on an Arisaka inline scout mount, and it's just so I can kind of reach it with this thumb. It does what I need it to. It keeps it sort of out of the way. I have some rail panels in here for heat, just because, I mean, you know, if you do any other kind of shooting other than more practical shooting, or like if you're doing cool guy quick shooting, you know, quick, like obviously this comes off. I just have a M-Lock 1913 section here. I don't have an ARCA section up here, it's just back here. But I have these panels here for heat, and I don't like vertical grips that much. It's just something I'm not really a big fan of. So I need this space for my hand. I was running into an issue with this ARCA rail, not this one, but the ARCA rail I had on it before, because it was a little too long. And they don't make that many compact ARCA mounts for the M-Lock sections, which is kind of disappointing. So it was kind of awkward putting my support hand on the rail, because I would actually like run into the back of my palm, which is kind of a pain in the ass. But I got this Bog one. It's angled and it's a little smaller. It's still a little bit bigger than I think it needs to be, but it gets it out of the way for me to be able to still use my support hand, which is good. All of this, and then I have a QD Magpul 1913 mount. I don't remember why I did this, but this is all on a Troy Alpha M-Lock. I think it's their Alpha rail, I think. It's whatever the one that uses the standard Delta, or it uses the standard barrel nut. And this is not a great rail. It was a free rail. It was a gift from Kevin. He gave it to me. He didn't want it. He ended up going a different route, and I ended up using it. But none of the M-Lock is actually like sized correctly, so like everything kind of rattles if it's not screwed on. So all this does is hold a light and a bipod in my ARCA. Like that is all that does. It protects the barrel. That's what this handguard does. I wouldn't trust it to hold zero with like an IR device or anything like that. Or even like a clip-on. I wouldn't use this. It's better than the rail I had on the other upper I'm not using currently, but it was also a front sight post gun. And it's using the Daniel Defense drop-in M-Lock, And that one just felt more hobby grade than anything else. This is the hobby grade, but not quite as hobby grade. This one's LARPing. This one's pretending quite well. So we like this handguard. It does what I need it to. It protects the barrel and keeps the barrel from getting too much deflection, or getting deflection at all, which is cool. So it is free float, obviously. And then obviously this uses a standard barrel nut. I don't know what upper this is. It was a mystery. I don't know. It's an upper I had. I have an old suppressed fest, if you know what that is. NFA Review branded Radian ambi charging handle, which is kind of cool. It's one of those SD lines. It's an older one. But like I said, I got it from NFA Review channel at one of their events, so that was kind of cool. So I had this laying around, and then it's sitting on an LMT or an MWS Mars L lower. I had this being used somewhere. Like I said, this is just I repurposed a bunch of stuff, and then the back end is just a PRS ratcheting castle nut. I don't really love these, but you don't fuck with them too much. The ratcheting mechanism seems okay, although I don't know why you wouldn't just use a normal castle nut, but whatever. I had it because I didn't know what I was doing when I built my first rifle, so I had that around. It's a carbine system with a standard carbine, like maybe an H1 and a standard carbine buffer spring. I don't know what spring's in here. I know this gun is very mild. It's not overgassed. I mean, if you care about ejection patterns, I mean, it's perfectly 430. It just kind of puts the cases out. I mean, it's pretty. It's nice if you're an AR nerd. It's very pretty. It's a very mild recoiling rifle. It locks open with 55 grain steel, so, you know, it works, and it's been reliable. The upper that I was using before, and most of this was to serve a bunch of options, was to serve glass. And the glass, I guess, without, you know, skirting around this, is the SLX 1-6 second focal plane Nova with their fiber wire. So it's not a precision scope, but I didn't know what I didn't know. Now I know more. I've gotten more into the scope market. I now have a better idea of what I wanted out of this rifle. I knew second focal plane was not it when I was going into this necessarily, or what I necessarily want. But in terms of a 6X, in what this optic is, just really quickly, for $300-ish, the 1X on here, it's criminal. This optic for them, especially for them, I mean, at a lot of different price points, is really good. And the second focal, or the 1X is insane. It's as close to red dot 1X as you can get for this kind of money. I mean, it's very impressive. It is truly red dot bright, and I don't really use any of that. I don't run this gun that close. Like I didn't, like, it's not what I wanted. It's what I had, so I'm using it. I have a piggyback just because I'm used to this kind of setup. It wasn't necessarily as a backup option or my dedicated 1X. The 1X on this rifle, I don't feel that I need a red dot. It's just, if I'm magged in at 6, it's nice for me to have a red dot real quick and then just kind of go down on the gun. That's just a convenience thing. It's not required. However, what I will say is I have no other sighting systems on this gun, so this is the secondary sight. I can use it. I'm on my chin. It's not a cheek weld. It's a chin weld. But I mean, it's still more usable than the previous option. I was running it with a Picatinny mount with a 409 on an adapter. Now I'm running this on a 30 mil RMR adapter, or RMR plate from Monstrum. Not a high-end dot, but it mounted it in a place relatively securely. It's not a hard use gun. So, I mean, this optics package, which is what it is good. It has extra high vortex precision rings. So, relatively speaking, I mean, this is a good solution. This is a plug-and-play solution. I like what this offers me. If I were to put myself in the mind of somebody that was doing acquisitions, what does this optics package give me? It gives me a great 1X. gives me a great aiming solution for when I'm magged in. It gives me a decent top end. It doesn't have a reticle. It's got a T reticle or a BDC reticle. This is in mils though, so everything is I speak mils. I don't speak MOA. I'm sorry. So I have unfortunately the wrong tool for this job, but this wrong tool still does a relatively decent job. The crosshairs are entirely too coarse. The adjustments are, I mean, it's not a Christmas tree reticle. It's a very standard BDC LPVO reticle. But it does what I need it to. I'm not dialing this. Obviously, it has scoped or capped adjustments. They're not locked. They're not anything like that. So this is, I mean, it's a $300 some odd scope. But it punches well above its weight class. And the package that I have here with these rings puts it at a very traditional eye relief. And also the eye relief here is pretty impressive. And then in terms of, I'm able to really have a true 1X for something that is under $500, which is super cool. But again, it's kind of a bummer because I'm not using this for that. So I do plan on getting a 2-10 or something along those lines. I think that would fit this role a little bit better. A 3-18 for something like a 6 arc or something like that. I think there's a lot of potential in there. I have a 3-16 or something on my LMT, which I like that magnification range a lot. I think it's really interesting. So I definitely have a different wish list for this. The next thing I'd like to try, it's also second focal plane, but it's also at a decent price point, and it's interesting at that price point to see what it offers, and that's the 1-10. Now that I know I'm not as interested right now in the 1X for what I'm trying to do with these guns, the 1X, and for what I thought I cared a lot more about red dot bright optics. What I really care about is contrast. That's what you and I care about when we think we want red dot bright. Red dot bright is really cool, but what you absolutely need is that really good clarity, that contrast, and a decent reticle design, because if you have those things, from what I've seen so far, red dot bright is not all that important. It's awesome and super cool that this does that, but it is kind of funny that, I mean, the things I'm learning so far. And then obviously everything's subject to change. This rifle setup is going to change. This bipod setup is going to change, but this gets me on the range. And I guess I'm doing this to say that you don't need to go out and build the high dollar thing, and you don't need to buy all of these things to get on the range. Now granted, I'm not a new shooter, and I have parts and things to have a whim and go build something. So I have a slightly different approach to this than, say, a newer shooter, but I'm still a new shooter in this discipline. So I'm excited for it. And like I said, in that vein, I mean, it's cobbled together. It's a Mars lower and just like a bunch of things cobbled together. So the only other thing I didn't mention is that this has a Geissele SDE, maybe. It's a 2-stage, I don't know. I think it's the SDE, but it's a 2-stage. It's not a single stage. I don't know if I like single stage or 2-stage yet. I haven't quite decided. I'm really used to 2-stage triggers, so I want to try both. But I also know that if I get into bolt guns, 2-stage triggers are more than single stage. So maybe I should get to learn to like the single stage. We'll see. But I hope to bring you guys along for what happens with this. Eventually we'll be on the range. It's just my time and schedule. This is how I can do it. So eventually, or not even eventually, I'll be doing more in-depth videos or in-depth looks at certain parts of this, just because I ramble and I need an avenue. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Ask questions, comments, subscribe, listen to the podcast, do things. I don't know. I'm probably going to be talking about this on the podcast at some point. On my podcast or somebody else's. Either way, definitely going to be talking about it. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again. And yeah, have a good one.